wet wash, or other sources of artificial wind generation. And my favorite, number 8, using lasers or other sources of electromagnetic radiation. Tara, what in the actual fuck? I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. So we thought that it would be fun going into the weekend to start out with a conspiracy theory that I think about literally every day, multiple times a day. And that is chemtrails. And the reason is because I see them all day, every day here in Florida. And I mean, I do live close to an airport and an Air Force base. So like they're in your face. I mean, it's undeniable. I mean, they take it to the point where you'll see like big X's in the sky, like things that are clearly not natural. And the other thing I noticed is that when it's a holiday that like the government would typically get off, the skies are like completely clear with no trails whatsoever. But most days they're there all day, every day. And if you're lost at what chemtrails is, I'm talking about the white streaks that you see in the sky that are not normal clouds. They're just like long streaks of white puffiness. Do you see those, Tara?
Yeah, you know what's crazy is like we've talked about this off the podcast before, and I just started noticing them more. And we also live by an airport over here. And like you said, it's every single day. And sometimes it's crazy, like when the sun goes down and the white streaks are lit up and it's like this pinkish hue. And I think, oh, it looks kind of pretty, you know? But if they really are chemtrails, that's more scary than pretty. And sometimes I can count like somewhere between 10 and 20 of them at a time. And like you said, they'll be like X's or crisscrosses. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, this is weird because my house in Texas is also very close to an airport. And it's an airport that's much busier than the small airport here. But I did not see nearly as many of these white streaks in the sky over there.
Yeah. Yeah. Same thing when I lived in Illinois. We were by O'Hare Airport and I never noticed them like the degree I noticed them here. And what's interesting, I mean, you know this when we were researching for the podcast, if you search the term chemtrails online, you see all these articles debunking it and saying it's just another conspiracy theory, aka conspiracy truth. And the term is actually censored on social media sites. Like you get this message that pops up that says like this could be harmful content. But what's interesting is if you do just a little bit of research, you'll find a ton of information posted by our own government online right there for everyone to see. But the thing is, instead of searching chemtrails, try searching geoengineering, weather modification, or cloud seeding. And that's where you'll see everything that explains what creates those quote unquote chemtrails that we see in the sky every day.
Okay, I have to ask your thoughts on something. When I was doing research for this episode, I, like you, was looking up articles and it was very hard to find anything except stuff debunking it. And there was an article on a website called science.howstuffworks. And it was talking about how chemtrails are really just persistent contrails and that those form when jet engines are like high in the atmosphere when the air is typically cold and sometimes like below -40. And the article was saying that, you know, the jet engines spew out this very hot air. And so one of the byproducts of the exhaust is water vapor. And when the hot, humid air hits a cold atmosphere with low vapor pressure, it results in condensation. And they were citing the FAA and saying that the water vapor that comes out of a plane's engine quickly condenses into water droplets and then it crystallizes into ice. And then it's these ice crystals that become contrails, which is like short for condensation trails. And that's what we're seeing. And then when the atmosphere is more humid, they linger a longer time. But when it's dry, they disappear more quickly. And according to the FAA, this is, quote, normal for contrails to last for hours and like cover great distances.
Yeah, so I've actually watched testimonies before from pilots and scientists and people that work for the Air Force. that are saying that this is actually false. And that what they say is that the trails, like the contrails from normal jets, dissipate in about 3 seconds. So, like, yes, it will create a trail, but it very quickly will dissipate. And it's not stuck in the sky all day long, like what we're talking about. And I mean, I suppose if it is cold enough, it could last longer, but that would be, just in the winter. Why are we seeing them all over the place in the summer as well? And so I did my own little science experiment, and I think everyone should go and do this. Just go outside and watch the planes and the jets go by all day. And you'll see, like, you will see planes go by, jets go by, and like there's a tiny trail that follows them, and it almost instantly dissipates. But the chemtrail is the trail that stays all day due to chemicals that are in it. And I mean, I live in Florida where it's 80 plus degrees outside every single day, and the chemtrails are abundant. So if it only does it when it's 40 degrees, like it wouldn't explain why we're seeing it all year round and seeing it all over the place. So I want to read directly from the NOAA.gov website because I want to prove that this is absolutely real and not some conspiracy. And by the way, you can go to this website and it will list all of the weather projects going on around the country, and there's a lot of them. So I recommend everyone go and check that out. So right on the website, it reads, quote, "The most common form of weather modification is cloud seeding, which increases rain or snow, usually for the purpose of increasing the local water supply. Weather modification can also have the goal of preventing damaging weather, such as hail or hurricanes, from occurring. As part of Public Law 92-205, all non-federal weather modification activities must be reported to the U.S. Secretary of Commerce." So it lists the activities that are subject to reporting. I'm going to read this list because it gets crazier and crazier. Okay. So number 1, seeding or dispersing of any substance into the clouds or fog to alter drop size distribution, produce ice crystals or coagulation of droplets, alter the development of hail or lightning, or influence in any way the natural development cycle of the clouds or their environment. Okay. Number 2, using fire or heat sources to influence convective circulation or to evaporate fog. Number 3, modifying the solar radiation exchange of the earth or clouds through the release of gases, dusts, liquids, or aerosols into the atmosphere. Number 4, modifying the characteristics of land or water surfaces by dusting or treating with powders, liquid sprays, dyes, or other materials. Number 5, releasing electrically charged or radioactive particles or ions into the atmosphere. Number 6, applying shock waves, sonic energy sources, or other explosive or acoustic sources to the atmosphere. Number 7, using aircraft propeller downwash, jet wash, or other sources of artificial wind generation. And my favorite, number 8, using lasers or other sources of electromagnetic radiation. Tara, what in the actual fuck? What the hell? So, okay, lots of things to point out here. Number 1, notice how it doesn't say that those things are banned or against the law. It simply says that those are activities that are subject to reporting if they're done by a non-federal entity. So that just tells me right there that the federal government is probably doing all of those things. Otherwise, why list them out if they're just a conspiracy and they're fake and there's no such thing as these lasers? Then why list it? You know what I mean? If it's just some silly conspiracy theory. And so the first thing that came to mind when I saw number 8 with the lasers is that if it's listing it out, lasers and other sources of electromagnetic radiation, then why was it such a big deal when people were suggesting that that happened with the Maui fires? Like, if this is something that is a thing, then why are they making it sound like the laser thing was all some big conspiracy theory? So I don't know. I don't think that it should be listed in black and white as an activity of what needs to be reporting or reported if it doesn't even exist. So, okay, you'll notice one of the options listed was shock waves, or explosive sources to the atmosphere. Now, this is like a whole other subject that maybe we'll go into someday, but I think the reason that they list this is our government actually did this in Operation Fishbowl, where they sent nukes into the atmosphere to see what would happen. And this is against the law now. There is a global law against doing this, but it was actually done by our own government. And if you look into HAARP, HAARP, which I'm sure we'll do an episode on at some point, you'll see like all kinds of crazy shit that our government is doing up in Alaska with our skies. So anyhow, the moral of the story is it turns out that chemtrails are not a conspiracy when you call it, quote, weather modification or geoengineering. Good to know, right?
Yeah.
So, what exactly is cloud seeding or geoengineering? So, it's a type of weather modification where you spray chemicals into a cloud to make it rain or snow or affect things like hurricanes. Hence the term chemtrails. Again, like I don't understand why this is still considered a conspiracy theory when it's literally all right here laid out in black and white by our government. And I don't know about you, Tara, but like when I was reading this, I'm thinking, okay, with all the crazy weather stuff happening over the past few months, the past year, with like all the hurricanes and like the weird stuff happening in California that hasn't happened like ever, it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah,
are these
it's like
things?
manufactured, but blaming it on climate change, when in
Yes.
fact, it's all things that they're capable of causing.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And that's why they're labeling it a conspiracy because they don't want us to catch on to what they're doing. So, anyhow, back to cloud seeding, the most common chemical sprayed is silver iodide. And you can look this up, like even on Wikipedia, it lists it, or like I said, NOAA.gov or like various other sources. But silver iodide has a health hazard rating of 2, which means that it can cause temporary incapacitation or possible residual injury to humans and other mammals with intense or chronic exposure. Well, as I stated earlier, like we see these chemtrails 24/7. It's all day, every day. So I would say that that is chronic exposure. And you got to think like, not only is it in our air, but how is it affecting our crops and our farmland and things like that? And as far as I could tell, the research started around the 50s. So if this has only been done since like the 50s at the earliest, then really, do we have any idea what the long-term impact could be? And it turns out that there's actually 37 countries that are using weather modification techniques. And I thought this was really interesting. They make it rain once a week in Dubai, which is in the desert. And they do this by using cloud seeding drones that zap clouds with laser beams. Like, Tara, did you even know that this was a thing? Because I sure as hell didn't.
Not the laser beam part, but when you mentioned that like this stuff has been going on since the 50s, I was reading about a British government experiment back in 1952 where they used cloud seeding and they made it with salt, dry ice, and the silver iodine to make it rain. And it was called Operation Cumulus, and it resulted in deadly flash flooding on August 15th of 1952. And it was in this village called Devon in England where dozens of people died. So they had to put the operation on hold. And then the British Ministry of Defense denied any involvement in cloud seeding until 2001 when the documents exposing it were finally declassified. So I also read, and I didn't make notes on it, but I saw this podcast and it was from 7 years ago. And it was talking about how both the United States and Britain did multiple experiments in the 50s.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then I was surprised to learn, though, that right now, California, Wyoming, Texas, Utah, and Colorado are all engaged in cloud seeding that we know of. And then this past Monday, the House passed a bill to create a pilot program for cloud seeding in Southeast North. Oh my God. Can we ever have a single episode where I don't fuck up my words?
Words
Southeast
are
New
hard, Tara. They're
Mexico.
just hard.
Apparently, they're hard for me. Southeast New Mexico. So this bill, it's HB 130, and it still has to make it through the Senate. But I was reading an article in the New Mexico Political Report, and this bill is being sponsored by Rep. Jack Chatfield from New Mexico. And he said that some of the data collection will include the amount of rain that occurs after cloud seeding and the level of residuals from cloud seeding chemicals in the precipitation. And according to Chatfield, in every state where residuals have been tested, the levels have been insignificant. And this has already been done twice in New Mexico before, but they didn't keep records at the time. So this is going to be like an entirely different program. But you have other members of Congress that aren't very happy with it and have expressed concerns about the bioaccumulation of the chemical substances in the environment. And like you said earlier, how they impact plants and animals.
Right. I mean, we're talking about metals collecting. They could be collecting in our water supply, our food supply, the air we breathe. Like, I can't imagine it's a good thing. And I looked and looked and looked, and it must be really censored. But I've seen there was a whistleblower that worked for the Air Force, and I've seen her testimony multiple times. But like I said, I couldn't find it, of course, when I actually need it. And she was talking about how she worked for like the overseers of these cloud seeding programs. And any like hazardous chemical has to be reported and it has to go through this whole process, like in the military. And she said that it wasn't just silver iodide, it was like aluminum, bromium, like all these things that are really deadly. And she reported it and she ended up getting in trouble for reporting it. And so like of course I couldn't find the whistleblower interview and testimony and all this stuff. So this is just me like speaking off the cuff. But do any of us really trust the government? Like if the government says it's safe, oh, it's safe. If the CDC says like, oh, there's really no long-term effects, like it could incapacitate you, but like probably not. Do we believe that after the whole COVID thing? Because I know I sure as hell don't believe anything they say at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not just this. I don't really believe anything our government tells us,
Right.
especially the FDA. And
Exactly. Exactly. And so, again, Tara, like you mentioned all these states. So clearly, like it's not a conspiracy when they're all doing that, when the Senate's talking about it. Well, now also New Hampshire actually is concerned about it. And in fact, this year, 2024, they're proposing a bill titled prohibiting the intentional release of polluting emissions, including cloud seeding, weather modification, excessive electromagnetic radio frequency, and microwave radiation, and making penalties for violation of such prohibition. This is the stuff of like nightmares and sci-fi movies. Like, think about this, Tara. Like, we're not just talking about cloud seeding. They're bringing up radio frequency, and you and I know a lot about that just with the subliminals and everything else, how potent that can be. And like these low frequencies can really damage like human beings. And then microwave radiation, like what? I mean, is that from cell phones, from 5G? Like I need to know more. And like, why is this? I mean, this is going through the government. This isn't someone just posting on TikTok. And so while I think this is great that New Hampshire's bringing this up, who's going to enforce it? Like, think about it. It's the government that's going to penalize the government for weather modification and microwave radiation. Like, do we really think that that's ever going to happen? Of course not, right?
when it comes to like states versus federal, it's always like such a weird mix to me because like even if you look at
Yeah.
the whole border thing with Texas and the federal government, like I love that states introduce these things, but the end result is the federal government usually wins, right?
Always. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And do you remember back in July of last year, the White House had published this report where they wanted to look at the possibility of doing a research program for solar radar modification, which is basically geoengineering. And the whole purpose of this was to try to block sunlight to prevent global warming and reverse the negative effects of climate change. And so, according to the article that came out, this was last year in the Epic Times, the White House document detailed multiple methods that they had to deploy this SRM initiative. And listen to what this includes: stratospheric aerosol injection, which apparently involves boosting the amount of aerosols in the stratosphere to reflect sun rays away from the Earth. Marine cloud brightening, which involves increasing the reflectivity of clouds so that sunlight is reflected back. And so, in the same report, they acknowledge that fucking with the weather like this has unknown consequences. So while they want to do this
Really?
stuff, yeah, exactly, right? While they want to do it, they're also at the same time we're warning about quote several potential negative consequences of SRM. The procedure can trigger changes in stratospheric temperatures, a rise in sea levels, acidification of oceans, and alteration in precipitation patterns. It can also affect terrestrial vegetation, biodiversity, ecosystems, crop production, and coral reefs. Model simulations show that atmospheric circulations may intensify, ways that may lead to seasonal scale impacts, such as more frequent droughts or precipitation events. Gaps remain in our understanding of how SRM deployments might irreversibly alter the Earth's climate system, end quote. And then this article also referenced a company called Make Sunsets. How, like, pretty
Sounds
sounding.
beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess they can launch weather balloons capable of releasing reflective sulfur particles into the Earth's atmosphere with the intention of trying to cool the planet. And they started this back in 2022. So clearly they're like doing this shit anyway.
Okay, I think everyone needs to go back and listen again to everything you just said because I have so much to say about this. There is so much here. Like, first of all, good research, Tara. This is fucking crazy. So you mentioned this could cause a rise in sea levels. Well, what are all the climate crazies always talking about? Oh, global warming, the sea levels are rising, yet they're causing it. Like, are you freaking kidding me? And then could cause droughts. Well, what happened right before the Maui fires? They were experiencing a very unusual drought. Same with the California wildfires. And then all of a sudden now you've got these shelf storms that are like flooding California for the first time ever. I mean, it's like, wake up, people. It is right here. They're telling us what they're doing because they know no one's paying attention. Everyone's too damn busy focusing on Taylor Swift, which I know obviously we are too. But like, this shit is really happening. And what's crazy is everything you just said, Bill Gates has been talking about for years, which again is why I think this man is like the closest thing there is to Satan. Like
Satan? Yeah.
he's fucking evil. I mean, they've even done Simpson episodes about Bill Gates blocking the sun because again, I've seen so many interviews where he flat out suggests we should really try to block sunlight with chemical created cloud cover to stop this global warming catastrophe. Like, and I want everyone to just think about that. You know, I'm big on like trusting your intuition, whether you call it that, whether like you're thinking like trust your gut. Does anyone think that it's a natural, normal, good thing to block sunlight? Like next thing they're going to be telling us block air. You don't want to go get fresh air. Stay in your homes because the fresh air is dangerous, or block plants, block animal. Like it's sunlight. We need it to survive.
I mean, that's
And
basically what they did with COVID, right? Stay inside,
yes,
don't go outside.
yep. And we need it to survive. Our crops need it to grow food. Like it's just amazing that they actually are saying this out loud. I mean, it's like telling us the plan. Crazy. So we're not the only ones that are into this whole conspiracy. One of my favorite guys, RFK Jr., is very much into this, and he discusses this on a podcast. So I want to play a clip from that. But he flat out calls out Bill Gates and the WEF for essentially creating a problem called climate change and then selling us on the solution, which is geoengineering, aka chemtrails, and how like the solution is more dangerous than the problem. So listen to this.
Climate, and climate is a real issue. And I've spent 40 years looking at that science, but what we've seen over the past couple of years is that issue has been captured, hijacked in many ways by the World Economic Forum and particularly by Bill Gates. They aggravate the problem and then sell us the solution. And of course, the solution that they want for climate are more social controls, the big solution of geoengineering projects, which of course Bill Gates is funding all over the world. And today I want to talk about geoengineering, and particularly as it's related to climate, because it is a threat that the environmental community needs to know about, and the rest of us need to know about. It is a threat that is probably as dangerous to us as climate.
As climate change. Sorry, it cut off. So obviously, like people always call him a conspiracy theorist, but he's talked about this so many times. Like, how come everything that they call him a conspiracy theorist for, he's won in court? Like, he's litigated this stuff for decades and won. He knows what he's talking about. And it's like, no wonder all we keep hearing about is climate change because they're causing it. And why are they causing it? Because they're making money on the solution. Like, again, wake up, people. Why would Bill Gates want to destroy farmland by blocking the sunlight and putting dangerous chemicals into the atmosphere so he could sell his lab grown shit that he's making? Like, it's all about profit, and the government's in on it. These people are all getting paid by these lobbyists. So
I was gonna
another
say,
good
just like the war in Ukraine.
Totally. I mean, it's so apparent now. I don't know how anyone is still like thinking this is a conspiracy, like any of it. And I'm trying to give like lots of resources because I want people to go and do their own research. Like, don't just take our word for it. Like I said, this is on government websites. And there's also an organization. And if you could go to their website, it's called geoengineeringwatch.org. And you'll find a ton of information on how dangerous this is. And they're trying to provide information to the public because they're saying, with all of their studies and the scientists that back them up, that weather modification is dangerous. So go and like research that. Go on the NOAA.gov, look up where these projects are taking place, because I guarantee probably near where you live as well. And Tara, another interesting thing. Did you know that there is a patent from 2001 on how to create hurricanes and tornadoes?
No, but I guess that shouldn't surprise me at this point.
I was like, what? I actually read this freaking patent because I was like, I don't believe it. And yeah, no, it's a real thing. So in the patent application, it says, quote, under certain conditions, a nation may find it advantageous to create a tornado or a hurricane. For example, creation of a strong storm system could deter an enemy attack. Figure 5 illustrates generators positioned to project sound waves concurrent with the rotational direction of winds to reinforce the rotating vector of weather system, thereby assisting in the system in attaining hurricane or tornado status. So in layman's terms, they can take a storm that already exists naturally and basically zap it, charge it up to create this intense event. Like, is it just me or does it sound like they're trying to play God?
Yeah.
Like, what the? It's so disturbing. And so, like, all of this is, we're going to
I
say
just want
something?
to say, yeah, I mean, they're already doing this with viruses. Why would they not do it with the weather?
Right, right. 100%. And like, we know that they're trying to push the climate agenda. So it's like, buckle up, everyone, because in order to push that agenda, what makes them push that agenda? When does the media start talking about it? When a natural disaster happens,
Yep.
quote unquote, natural disaster, because it's like they're freaking causing it. And so, like, all of this is literally, it's just a small sliver of the information that is out there on chemtrails, chemtrails in quotations, because there's lots of names for it. But I hope it sheds light on some of these conspiracies that, again, like we always say, they all are backed up by data and provided by our own government. It's just that they're hoping that people are too stupid to do their homework and look at it. And just a reminder that if someone calls this or anything else a conspiracy, it typically takes about 2 minutes of research to find this type of information, again, provided by our own government. So don't fall for the media narrative that this is all some silly conspiracy theory. And like RFK Jr. says, a conspiracy theory is just something the government doesn't want you to see and doesn't want you to think about. So my recommendation is start paying attention to the skies. Do your own little research project. We're looking down at our phones all the time, but if you start bringing your attention upward, you'll see a lot of crazy shit happening in the sky that certainly isn't Mother Nature. So that's your homework. Go look at the sky. Also, look into HARP and let us know if you want to hear an episode on it, because man, is that a can of worms. Like, that's a good one. We're going to have to do that, Tara. All right,
Yeah.
everyone, have a great weekend. I hope you enjoyed our latest conspiracy theory episode, and we'll see you back here on Monday. Thanks for tuning in. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.